Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jeffrey Schultz and I am a master's student in computer science attending Concordia University, Chicago. In this video, I will be discussing basics of Linux terminal, navigations, commands, and file structure. So let's begin. So the terminal interface, a terminal or a shell, it can be called either, is a text-based interface to interact with the Linux operating system. So some common shells are called bash, zsh, sh, but most distributions I discussed in my previous video, if you have not watched that one on my distributions, please watch that one. They are default to bash. So there's something called the prompt, and it's got an anatomy to it that I want to go over because it's really important. So if anything you see here that comes before the command, so you see the command to run will be date. Anything that comes before this is called the command line prompt. So in this case, the base Cyprian with the little squiggly line and $sign would be your command line prompt. And whatever command you type in, the computer will respond. So Wednesday, July 31st at whatever time in 2019 was when this command was run. So anytime you're finished, you can run a new line and you can run a new command starting. So this is really important to understand this structure because there's a lot of commands that we're going to be going over in this video, some popular ones that you really use in Linux. So let's continue. So there is a file system structure in Linux. Obviously, you start at the root directory. All of these are really important, but I'd say the ones that are the most important are the first four: bin, boot, dev, etc. Bin is the user command binaries. Boot is the static files for the bootloader. So that's how your computer is going to be able to start up. The device files and the system configuration for the host. So these are all really important. Like I said, they're all important, but these are all really, really important for the file system. So let's continue. So some navigation commands. So you got pwd, which stands for print working directory, and all this does is just displays the absolute path to your current directory. So wherever directory you are, pwd will print the path to where you are currently. So if you see here, you got another one, change directory, which is cd, but you're like, wait, why is there something after this command? I thought commands were just supposed to be by themselves. That is true, but you sometimes have to do things. Like if you're changing to a directory, you obviously have to change to something with the name. You can't just change to whatever. You actually can type in cd. It will take you to the home directory. But if you want to move to another directory that you've created, you type in cd and whatever the directory name is that you want to move to. And let's say you were to type this in. If you want to go back up a level, you would type in cd ... It's just going to take you to one level up to whatever directory you were at before. So let's continue. So for listing and viewing files, you got a command type. It's called ls. It just lists the contents of the directory that you're in. The default command is ls just by itself, just like this. Just like how pwd, you don't type anything after. You just type in ls for this one. But there's another one that's called a long format. It's ls-l. So this shows permissions, ownership of a file, its size, timestamp, so when it was accessed, created, things like that. And then you have another one called more. And obviously for this one, you have to type in the file name because you're viewing the contents of a file. So in order to view the contents, you have to type in more and whatever file name you want to view the contents of, one page at a time. So for creating and modifying files and directories, you got a bunch here. You got 6 commands for this. So the first one, to be able to create an empty file or update the timestamp, is called touch with whatever file, whatever you want to name it. Usually you can update the timestamp, but usually this is used for just creating a new file, an empty file that you're going to make some edits to. And something that can go in with this is called Pico. I don't have it here, but Pico is just a text editor in Linux that you can use to add contents to a file. This just makes it, if you wanted to make a file and add contents to it in one step, you could just use Pico, but you could use both. Touch just creates one. But if you want to go and edit that file that you just created, you would use Pico, which is Pico. So for another one, to create a new directory, you go mkdir, make directory, with whatever the name of the directory you want to create is. If you want to remove a directory, it's rmdir, with whatever directory you want to be able to delete, whatever the name. For cp, this is just able to copy the contents of one file to another one. It's just going to create 2 identical files with 2 different names. So let's say you wanted to copy the contents of one file to another. Let's say file 1 is a file that I created using touch. If I wanted to copy the contents of that file to file 2.txt, you would just say cp file1.txt, which is your source file, and then the destination file, the one you want to copy it to, is file 2.txt. And if you want to be able to do this for folders, if you want to copy a folder, you would just do cp -r with whatever 2 folders for directories you'd want to copy. For being able to move files or rename files for directories, the command is mv. And usually this is used for, you can use it to rename files, but usually this is used to move a file into a directory. So let's say I'm in my home directory, I create a file named using touch, and then I create a directory using mkdir. If I want to move that file that I just created in my home directory into the directory that I just made, you would just say mv, whatever the name of the file is, your source. So mv file1.txt into whatever directory name, the destination. So we're just moving this file into the directory. And if you want to remove a file, whether from whatever directory you're in, you just do rm with the file name, whatever the one you want to remove is. So moving on. For permissions and ownerships, this looks a lot harder than it actually is. It looks very complex, but it's really important to understand. So the minus sign is just a directory, which you can use, you can find through pwd, which is just going to print the directory that you're in. So this is just going to be for the directory. Then you have U, which is for user, G for group, and O, which is for others. And for each of those, you have different permissions. So R is for read, W is for write, and X is for executable. So R is being able to read a file, W is going to be able to write a file, and X is going to be able to execute a file, so running it. So the command that goes hand in hand with these permissions is called chmod for changing permissions. So for example, if I want to add the read permission for a user, I would go chmod u for user plus R for read permission to whatever file name I want to use it to. So this one I just said file.txt. If I wanted to do a write permission for a group, you would do G for the groups change chmod, change mod, G plus W for write for the same file, for whatever file you want to name this to. This could be any file, whatever you want to add it to. It could be a coding file, it could be a text file, it could be any file that you have in your directory. And then for adding the execute permission for others, so UGO, like I said from the last slide, you got users, groups, and others. So UGO. So others would be the execute permission, you would go O plus X. You might be wondering, why is it not E for execute? I don't know. That's just how the definition of Linux is. It is just plus X. It's R, W, and X. And if you wanted to say, well, you might be able to add all these permissions, but how do you remove them? Well, instead of a plus sign, you can just type a minus sign. So if I wanted to remove, once I added this, let's say I wanted to remove this write permission from groups, I could just type in chmod G minus W file.txt. And the same goes for any one of these. And you can add any permissions to any one of these, users, group, and others. You can add any three of these permissions to them. So there's another thing in Linux called wildcards. An asterisk just matches 0 or more characters. So for example, if you want to list all the text files, you could just type in ls, list contents of the command we went over, asterisk.txt, because it's all file names with the text file extension. For the question mark, this just matches a single character. So if you look here, if I type in ls file .txt, it's going to list all contents that have a single character after the file. So if you notice here, it would match to file 1 or file A because there's exactly one character after file and .txt remains the same. So everything else remains exactly the same except the question mark. That can vary. So, but if I were to type in file 12, notice that there's two things before .txt and after file. I would need 2 question marks, so this one would not match. Since there is only 1 question mark here and not 2, you would need, if you wanted to match this to 12, you would need 2 question marks. And then the last thing is called group. So every file has a user owner and a group. Groups just define shared access among these users. And if you want to see the groups you're in, you can just quite literally in your command line type the word groups and it will show you what they're in. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys learned something new. I hope you guys enjoyed. In my next video, I will actually be demonstrating all of these commands in the Linux terminal using my Mac. So I hope you enjoyed. Please be to like, comment, and share, and have a great day.